All right, this is Alan Jesse with Cherokee Feed and Seed. We are glad you are joining us today. To my left, I have Peggy Miles, equine specialist. To my right, we have Megan Brown, our new outside sales rep, equine specialist. So we're glad you could join us today. We understand that this is a new normal, is different, but we want to let you know we are still here for you. All three stores, Ball Ground, Gainesville, North Fulton, our stores are open. You can come in and pick up your stuff like always. You can call and we'll deliver it curbside, or we can deliver to you. So while things are a bit different, you can still get hay, feed, and barn supplies. Today we have Dr. Anna Pesta, equine nutritionist with Purina Animal, to talk about evaluating your feed program. Remember, this is a live interaction session, so please type your questions as we are going along. At the end of the session, we will tell you how to qualify for 5 free bags of Purina feed. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Anna Pesta and let her talk about the feed.
Okay, hi everyone. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, yes, okay. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I think quarantine has probably created the most traffic on Facebook Live for everybody lately, because this is a new way for us to try to reach you guys as horse owners. And hopefully, if you're still able to get out to your barn, maybe you already went out and rode this morning and are having a little afternoon at your house. And I'm glad you've chosen to have a little horse education with us this afternoon. I just wanted to cover, I have a little bit of prepared information on some timely topics that might be kind of at the top of everyone's mind right now. And then I wanted to open it up to more interactive question answer time. I know we got a bunch of good questions already on the Facebook post, and I have some of those, but as we're going to be watching the comments so we can get some questions answered in real time and hopefully make it interactive. And whether or not all the topics are related, they probably won't be, that's fine. But I'm sure everybody's got some different burning questions in their minds. So I just wanted to start off by saying that, of course, right now is kind of an odd time in the horse business, and we feel that in the feed sector just as much as you guys do out there with your barns. I know there's some facilities and training and lesson programs that have had to kind of pause activities right now, and either whether that's you or maybe you're a professional or a trainer or somebody that is not out on the road, all of these things could create some financial questions right now. And whether or not that's your situation, or things are mostly the same for you, but you've got extra time on your hands, this is a good time to kind of reevaluate your feed program and take this opportunity to look at what you're doing and decide if it still makes sense. If you're doing things in the most efficient and economical way possible while still meeting all of your goals. I just realized, am I on the live or are you guys? Because you're the biggest thing on my screen. But I'll just keep talking.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great, thanks. It's kind of a lot of time. Okay. Sorry. So now is a good time to reevaluate, your feeding program. As kind of time goes on, maybe especially in a boarding barn or a place that's got a lot of different kinds of horses, I know how easy it is to all of a sudden have feeds just proliferate in your feed room. And it's like, well, I had to get this supplement for this one horse when he had this, and then a new horse came in and he was on this and we just left him on it. etc., etc. And then before you know it, your nice, tight, efficient feeding program gets a bit messy. So, right now is a good time to think about that. If you are trying to think about economics and how to save money with your feeding program, we just want to make sure that we're all doing it in the smartest way possible. There's a lot of probably false economies out there of ideas that sound like a good, thought. Maybe just, buying a cheaper bag of feed looks like a good idea at the time, but we want to make sure we're looking at the full picture to make sure it makes sense. So I'm going to, talk a little bit about that. And if you've got kids at home and you're running out of homework assignments and good interactive enriching projects, horses are full of good math questions, and this could definitely be a good project for the whole family. So I'm actually going to share a few slides, just a structured way to think about how to evaluate your feeding program. And if you are looking at making sure it makes financial sense, where are the places you need to look? And what are the pieces of data that you need? So if you I need to get this out of the way. Share my screen, make this go full screen. Okay. So if we're gonna do the project of figuring out, maybe you don't want to look at the final answer of this, but if you do want to figure out how much your feed bill is in a month or a year for a horse or all your horses, your whole program, gonna need to collect some information first. So obviously you need the price per bag of feed. Got to add up all those supplements that we don't like to think about. A lot of them, especially on SmartPack, do break it down cost per day for you. So you get that down on paper, figure out, make sure your bag of feed, whether it's 40 or 50 pounds, you got that. And then figure out how much each day, how much each horse eats per day to maintain their body condition. And maybe right now that has changed. So now is also a good time to go through and body condition score all your horses. They're not running down the road showing and working as hard, and maybe a lot of us have potentially eased off of our fitness work on a lot of horses. They may have become a little bit easier keeping. Maybe you have more horses in your program that could be ration balancer candidates. And maybe you need to make sure not too many of them have fallen below the recommended feeding rates for a certain feed. Or maybe that horse that wasn't getting attention, but now you're at home and you've got time to ride him, is in a lot more work. So how much is everybody eating for their job today? And then hay. So forage is, a full 50% of the equation. Well, really more, because any horse in a given day, their diet is, potentially 80% forage, and that makes up a huge component of your true cost. And it's, we see the price per bag of feed every time we go to the feed store, and maybe you're not seeing that as often on your hay, but it's a good exercise to go through and find out how much you're truly paying for hay and how much is your horse actually eating. There's actually a lot of good data out there on hay wastage when fed through different methods, different hay feeder types, brown bell ring types, all of that. And, your hay cost isn't how much they eat, it's how much you threw out there for them to eat. And all of it that you pitchfork back into the muck bucket at the end of the day still cost you money. So figure that out to the best of your knowledge. Of course, figuring out how much they eat involves weighing your feed, and this is an important thing to do. We preach this on every single horse meeting we do anywhere. Please figure out how many pounds per day your horse eats, because a scoop is not just a scoop. There's scoops out there that are little 1-cup yogurt containers, and there are scoops that are 5-pound coffee can type of scoops. So we have little scales. You can get like a hanging luggage type scale or a fish scale, or a kitchen scale could work potentially, but figure out how much your scoop of your feed weighs. And then you can do the same thing with square bales or flakes of hay. So put a flake or two, whatever's normal for you, in maybe like a kitchen trash bag and hang that on the scale and figure out how much your flakes weigh, because it can vary widely. I've seen even just grass hay flakes weigh as little as 1.5 pounds, and they can be as heavy as potentially 5 pounds. And that makes a huge difference over the course of a month. So looking at, setting up this side-by-side cost analysis, this is, the math that uses all of those data points that I was talking about collecting. And this could be, brand 1 and brand 2. This could be 2 different feeds from the same brand. But you can look at what varying cost per bag does. You can also look at what varying calorie content does. In this example, the brand 2 feed, yes, it costs $22 a bag, but if you only have to feed 4.5 pounds of it, that's telling you that this feed is significantly higher in calories per pound. And if it's a better formulated feed that may be, I don't know, in the case of Outlast, it's a feed that has the Outlast gastric buffer built in. So that's saving you a top dressing cost. Or maybe it's a higher fat feed that you don't have to buy your rice bran anymore. Or maybe it's, a more complete fortified feed that you don't need to buy that broad spectrum vitamin mineral package anymore. So that cost per day needs to go in there for whatever you're adding to your feed, whether it's a scoop of beet pulp or a scoop of soaked alfalfa pellets, whatever goes in the bucket. And you can see just in this kind of simple example that, $22 versus $14 sounds like a car payment, but at the end of the day, it actually can make more financial sense to feed a higher quality, more complete feed that's more calories per pound. And this is just kind of the, written out explanation of the calculations that go into that. So if you've got some kids at home that need a good long math problem, you can write all this out, and it's pretty logical to follow along. The cost per pound of feed, the cost per pound of hay, multiply it out for as big a number as you want to look at. And this example that has the math already done for you kind of really illustrates that hay and forage cost that I was mentioning before. It makes sense that your feed, if it's $19 or $20 a bag, it costs a certain amount. But I know in a lot of parts of the country, I'm over here in Aiken, I forgot to mention that, but in our area, especially in certain times of year when hay gets scarce, or maybe good hay especially is scarce, a 55-pound bale of orchard alfalfa can be at least this much. So it's important to look at your hay cost, and it can be significantly more than your feed. So then ways to get around to help augment that would be, especially during times when horses aren't working as much, we're getting into good grass conditions now, utilize pasture some more, figure out ways to decrease your hay loss. Maybe the investment in one of those hay huts could pay off. Or if you're only able to find hay that they're wasting a lot of, or it's poor quality, or you just don't have much hay and you're needing to stretch that supply, a product like a hay stretcher pellet can make a lot of sense, because the wastage on a hay pellet is virtually zero, because you're putting it in their bucket and that they're eating every bit that you're giving them, and that financially can add up quickly. Okay, I am going to stop sharing my screen and just also address some of the questions about how is this economic environment affecting feed companies. So, you know, this is made things different for us, just like it has a lot of different sectors of the economy and other food production, that sort of thing. Our feed mills have been running full time, just like they usually do. We have about 16 horse plants that make feed around the country, and the one that's most local to this area is in Gainesville, Georgia. So a lot of our Purina feed is made right there in Gainesville. And those folks that are working in those plants making feed are considered frontline essential employees. And Land O'Lakes, our parent company, has actually given them a raise during this time. We feel like it's really important to keep the lights on at the plant and keep everybody's horses fed. We haven't seen big disruptions. There was that couple of weeks there early on where everybody kind of stocked up on feed and ran to the feed store and bought a lot. So maybe there was some disruption a little bit there, but really we haven't yet seen having to quit making certain feeds, that sort of thing. So we've been in good shape there. However, events like this and, you know, other, you know, times throughout the years, we've seen impacts on ingredient supplies. So for example, one of the interesting kind of chain reaction events that's happened in the feed business with this is wheat middlings, which are a really useful component of a lot of pelleted feeds. They're a high protein and high fiber component that comes from wheat milling, and they're the byproduct of like bread production and human flour milling. And when people are consuming less of those products because they're not going out to eat as much and all of that, there's fewer wheat mids being produced, and therefore there are fewer flowing into the feed supply, because a lot of our feed ingredients are byproducts from human food production. Beet pulp comes from sugar production, wheat mids come from flour production, soybean meal comes from soybean crushing that goes into making oil and meal and all of that. So that's one effect that we have seen, but we see this stuff all the time. There are ingredient pressures all the time. Last year and the year before, like recently, we've seen issues with, you know, beet pulp potentially. But how we manage around that is we have a team of people that are, you know, watching this stuff and trying to plan ahead, and we feel very confident in our supply chain. And I think somebody had a question, is how does this impact the consistency of ingredients that various, you know, feed companies are able to obtain? And we actually have really high standards for example, our beet pulp shreds that we are willing to accept into our plants. And, you know, therefore we have to pay extra attention to supply and really forecast out a lot of, you know, contracts and that sort of thing. So we feel really good about our ingredient supplies, and we have not, you know, switched out ingredients or traded down to, you know, buy whatever is handy or cheap at the time. That's not the kind of formulation that goes into our horse feed. So I hope that answers some questions about kind of what's been going on in the feed business with all of this. Honestly, I'm going to optimistically, hopefully say that we're getting towards the end of some of the worst of this, but who knows what's going to happen for the rest of the summer and into the fall. And we have a team of nutritionists and formulators staying on top of it. So we will make sure that your feed is consistent and, you know, what you would expect. That kind of covers what I had planned for the timely topics, COVID related questions that people had brought in. And I'd like to maybe move to some of the questions that were, you know, submitted ahead of time, talk about some other things that are on people's minds. Am I still live and moving because my screen, I can't see anything and everyone else is frozen. So,
Well, I see you, Anna. There's a question from Catherine Davis, which I think is the same one that she submitted previous, but senior feeds and non-senior, how do you know when to change? And then she has a second one, old hard keepers, that kind of relates to it. Old hard keepers, how do you put on weight and maintain supplements versus balancers? So it's a senior horse kind of all encompassing.
Yeah.
Well done, Catherine Davis.
Yeah. So senior horses, huge topic we could spend all day on, but everybody probably has some around. And if you don't, you probably will at some point. That's kind of how it goes. So let's talk about senior horses for a minute. And if other people have like senior related questions as we go along for the next couple of minutes, feel free to throw them in there. How do you know when it's time for a senior feed? Basically, when their teeth start to deteriorate, so they're no longer effectively grinding and chewing long-stem forage, or when their internal machinery, when their hindgut just kind of over time decreases in its ability to extract all the good out of hay that it used to, then it's time to move to a senior feed. So maybe you'll see your horse chewing differently or dropping quids of chewed up balls of, looks like green balls of grass or hay around where he eats, or he's eating hay just like he always did, but he's starting to lose weight. It's that old horse who stands at a round bale all day and is just slowly getting skinnier and skinnier. That tells you he's not getting as much good out of his hay as he used to. Any of those things mean that we need to start supplementing him with all that good digestible fiber that he's now missing out on because he's not doing a good job with hay. So that's what differentiates a senior feed from a regular feed, is that it can be partial to total forage replacement. So it's got the right kind of fibers built in there to be a supplement or substitute for hay. So, there's some old guys out there that live on straight senior. They gum up 15 pounds of equine senior a day, every day, can't eat any hay because they're a choke risk, something like that. They just can't chew it well enough. And they may eat straight senior, or there's some horses that still eat some hay, but they're just not getting that much good out of it. So they end up eating maybe like 6, 8, even 10 pounds of a senior feed a day. So I guess that's why you might feed a senior feed. There's plenty of senior horses that, go right up to their dying day, and as 25 or 28-year-olds still chew hay just fine, and they are still fat, easy keepers, and they could eat ration balancer for their whole lives potentially. So that can still be an option for a senior horse. It's all about feeding them to their body condition. So I could see senior horses being on a balancer. You could feed them like a performance horse if they're just getting a bit hard keeping in their old age, or maybe they're still active. You feed them a performance feed, or senior active. That's the difference between equine senior active and regular equine senior, is whether or not it's meant to be fed with hay. What else? What was the other part of the senior question?
Supplements versus balancers. So that would be kind of like that easy keeper kind of senior horse.
Yeah, a lot of times if they're balancer candidates and they're the ones that can mostly maintain their weight on forage, a true ration balancer will get a better job done than like a vitamin mineral supplement, because the ration balancer is bringing a lot of good protein and amino acids to the table to help them maintain their muscle mass and not get that more wasted away old man look. And that can also be useful to add on top of, if they eat just kind of a moderate amount of regular feed or senior feed, a pound of balancer thrown in there can also help support their muscle mass.
Okay, so Sarah asks, would love to know the best diet to maintain healthy weights on my mini horses and mini donkeys throughout the summer.
Yeah, so while we're on the topic of ration balancers, good segue. Mini ponies, donkeys, anything really easy keeping that is little air ferns that can just live on hay or grass, a ration balancer is the thing for them. And how much to feed scales with their body size. So if we say the rule of thumb is 1 pound for a 1,000-pound horse at maintenance, it's a 1/4 pound for a 250-pound mini pony at maintenance, or even less. You can scale down from there. But that, people often say, well, I don't want to feed them anything else. They don't need any calories at all. They're already fat just eating hay. But they still need nutrition. They still need their good vitamins and minerals. They still need amino acids that they can't get from their forage. So feeding a very small amount of ration balancer is definitely a good move. A question I often get is, we have a mini horse and pony feed, and should I feed that instead? That is for mini horses and ponies that are working and have some calorie needs and need feed. If they're the easy keepers, they should just be on balancer.
Okay, Taryn has a question. Is the risk of colic greater with the hay stretcher? What is the typical ingredient list for the hay stretcher?
Okay, so hay stretcher is a really interesting tool, and if you aren't as familiar with it, it's something to maybe be aware of if you ever need it. So in times when hay is really poor quality and it's that stemmy, mature stuff, I mean, we had some bad hay years down here recently. If all you've got is bad quality hay and the horses are choosing to leave it behind, you're cleaning a lot of it up out of their stalls and their paddocks, or it's just poor quality and they're eating all of it, but they're still losing weight, hay stretcher can be a good option because it approximates a pretty good quality hay. It's actually a bit higher calorie than an average grass hay, and it's fortified with vitamins and minerals. So it's a really nice, complete stand-in for good quality hay. And if hay gets really expensive and scarce and you need to stretch your supply, maybe you've got a whole barn full of horses and you're looking at how much hay you've got left for the season and it's not quite adding up. Instead of throwing 2 flakes in the morning, you could throw a flake of hay and maybe a 3-pound scoop of hay stretcher. And depending on the economics, that can actually pencil out. And sometimes it doesn't matter about the economics, you're going to run out of hay. But hay stretcher, it's not just ground up hay, because that would defeat the purpose. If hay is expensive and hard to find, we're not just going to grind it up and put it into pellets. So it's other fibers. It's a blend of fiber sources that we use in horse feeds all the time, plus some added vitamins and minerals to put back together the equivalent of a good quality grass hay. So it's going to have things like soybean hulls, wheat midds, that sort of fiber ingredients that go into feeds already, but it has the right type of fiber, just like a senior feed does, that it will act similarly in the digestive system and give enough of that bulk and scratch and long stem fiber factor to keep their guts happy. So I would not say that the colic risk would be any higher. If anything, it would be safer or lower risk than feeding a very poor quality hay, because very poor quality stemmy, high ADF, very lignified, mature hay is an impaction colic risk. So if it's that or feed some hay stretcher, I would certainly want to stretch that a bit with hay stretcher. But it's an adjustment for the horse, because you're decreasing the amount of time they have hay in front of them. So you're going to have to potentially be a little creative in how you keep them busy and satisfied throughout the day.
Okay, this is one from the post that that was put up asking about questions. This is Sandy Darby. We feed this to our brood mares, whatever this is. I don't remember, Sandy, but it is too much. Is it too much protein as far as foals are concerned?
Yeah, so I remember seeing this question, and the post had a bag of Healthy Edge at the top of it, so she may be referring to that. But no matter what she's referring to, the question of, is something too high in protein for foals? this is an appropriate question for this time of year because everybody is having babies right now. And we have growth feeds and mare and foal feeds. That's the same thing. A growth feed and a mare and foal feed, that means the same thing. It means it's appropriate for pregnant mares, mares that are in lactation and have a baby by their side. And it means it's something that would be appropriate for the baby to start nibbling on and as like a creep feed situation or eating alongside the mare. And then it would be appropriate for that baby to keep eating as a weanling to a yearling and potentially up to a 2-year-old or whenever you're going to switch them to their adult diet. So what makes these feeds different is generally they're actually a little bit higher in protein than a mature horse feed, because young growing baby horses and pregnant mares and mares in lactation have higher protein requirements than an adult horse because they're rapidly growing and putting on, muscle tissue and bone and all of that. So we would be thinking a 14 or a 16% protein feed is probably the most appropriate for those guys. The idea that too high of protein causes leg issues in babies is kind of an old, disproven, old-timey kind of myth at this point. There's been lots of work done on that, and that our modern growth feeds, when fed correctly, that have the right balance of protein and energy to go along with it, and structural building components of vitamins and minerals, when you keep all that in balance in a correctly fortified feed, that you get proper growth. So I wouldn't be too worried about too high of a protein feed. That you're feeding your brood mares wouldn't be appropriate for your babies. If that makes any sense. Feeding babies and mares could be a whole nother topic unto itself, and we could do that actually, but there's a lot of nervousness out there. I mean, you've spent all this time and effort and money to make the baby in the first place, and everybody gets really, rightfully concerned about wanting to grow them correctly and not mess anything up and not have their legs grow too fast and all of that. And the best way you can possibly ensure that you're going to get everything done correctly is to feed an appropriate amount of a well-designed feed that's appropriate for their life stage. So you can grow them really slowly if you'd like. You can grow them moderate or a little bit faster if you'd like. If they're going to be shown as a weanling or a yearling, you can grow them at different speeds, but we can do it correctly at each of those speeds as long as we keep everything in balance. Not too much gas pedal for the amount of structural building blocks that you're providing, so they don't grow too fast that their bones can't keep up, that sort of thing. If anybody ever has any questions about that, you can get in contact with us.
That was great. Lots of information. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna kind of put a bunch of about 3 questions into one, and it's basically about ulcers.
Oh.
The first one is how much grain and what kind versus forage would be best for an ulcer-prone horse? Been treated for ulcers, just trying to prevent. Then there is which is best for a horse with history of gastric ulcers, Outlast or Healthy Edge. And then there is, if I can find it again, so go ahead and start.
Okay, yeah, I'll get started. Ulcers, huge topic. Again, everybody is very interested in feeding their ulcery horse correctly, and I feel your pain. I have had multiple ulcery horses in my past, being an event horse person, riding thoroughbreds. So, first of all, I would say, aside from the whole disclaimer of talk to your vet, get them scoped, treat them with the real drugs, do it for the right amount of time, do all that. Let's start from the point where they're healed and we want to prevent them from recurring, because you're not going to heal them up just with a supplement. It's going to take the kind of acid suppression you get from real pharmaceuticals to get them healed. I don't care how long you feed Outlast. If they've got a bad case of ulcers, it's not going to heal up on its own. So let's talk about how to manage them moving forward, or preferably just prevent them from getting ulcers in the first place. of course, their diet and any performance horse's diet needs to be based on as much good quality forage as possible. So they need to eat plenty of nice quality hay throughout the day. They're meant to be grazing animals, and the less time their stomach sits empty, the less acid and salt you're getting throughout the day. So small, frequent meals of good quality forage should be where they get the bulk of their calories. But then if we're talking performance horses, and we're talking ulcery performance horses who could be hard keeping, we're going to probably have to supply some additional, concentrate feed. So when I'm choosing one, especially for a hard keeper, I want to choose something that's got some calorie density to it so I can keep the meal sizes reasonable. If I was going to try to feed a hard keeping ulcery thoroughbred a low calorie, light or low carb type of feed, sometimes it would take an awful lot to get them to gain weight like you're going to want them to. So feeding a more fat and fiber based feed can get you some calorie density in there. Fat is really good for increasing calorie density. However, while I'm on that subject, grain-based feeds and textured feeds do not create ulcers. There's a lot of kind of angst out there about that, and it's more of not a cause and effect. But think about racehorses. They're the ones that are eating the most of a textured grain-based feed, and they're also the ones that are most likely to be ulcery, but it's because they're the ones that are the stressful lives, no turnout, staying in their stalls, eating big meals, not being grazing, all of that. So they check the box for literally every other risk factor for developing ulcers as well. So I would not necessarily feel like you could not feed an ulcery, thoroughbred event horse a textured feed. Omeline 500 is a perfect example of a good option for exactly those kind of horses. That's kind of another discussion, but I would pick a concentrate that you can feed, reasonable amounts of. I'm talking meals of no more than 5 pounds in a sitting. And if they're hard keeping and you feel like you need to feed more, divide them up into, they might need a lunch or a late night feeding, something like that, to keep their meal sizes smaller. And then I would look at some kind of effective science-backed feed through, like long-term preventative. Outlast, our gastric buffer that we've had out for several years now, is extremely effective in that way. Horses eat it readily, and it's very economical to include in a program long-term. So you can buy, Top Dress Outlast separate onto any program, or you could choose a feed that already has it built in that is the appropriate calorie level for that performance horse, which is anything from Strategy Healthy Edge to Strategy Impact Professional Performance, Ultium Gastric Care, and all of the Omelines all have Outlast built in. So when they eat a meal of any of those feeds, they're getting Outlast built in. How the math works out is it's 4 pounds of feed equals a dose of Outlast, but we can talk about how best to incorporate that in a horse that maybe doesn't need to eat 4 pound meals, AM and PM. What else about ulcery horses? I think good quality forage, the right concentrate that they can eat in an appropriate amount, and maybe has some, something calorie dense potentially if they're the harder keeping ulcery type, and then incorporating some sort of long-term preventative that's got some data behind it, preferably so you don't have to spend perpetuity on prevention level doses of omeprazole.
So I have some endurance questions. Christy is asking, what feed for endurance horses, 25 and 50 miler? And then another related endurance question, what hay would you recommend for endurance horse? Orchard, Bermuda, alfalfa, et cetera, and how much?
Oh man, okay. So In my brief, admittedly exposure to the upper level endurance world, I have seen people doing a wide variety of things. So I'm going to go ahead and say it depends on your type of horse and, a lot of individual variation. But I would say, the base of their program needs to be, if I personally had to design a program, I'd say the best quality grass hay, that you can readily get a hold of as their base, and then supplementing with alfalfa. I know during the holds, during an actual, day of a race, alfalfa during their break times is really useful. It's extremely palatable. They eat it well, and it provides you some nice buffering to their stomach to keep them comfortable. It's got a lot of calcium and magnesium in it. And then concentrate wise, I've seen people use a lot of different things, but if these horses are working long durations of time, they're doing a lot of aerobic work, and they're burning a lot of kind of fat and fiber type calories. So a higher fat concentrate can be useful because it provides a lot of calorie density and more of what we tend to think of as slower burning fuel. So if I had to just put it very simplistically, I would say something like an Ultium. I personally work with and consult on a girls program who, rides FEI level endurance races and travels all over the world. And she's in Texas, and that is her program. Good quality. She feeds coastal because they have that similar to us. She feeds really good quality coastal, supplements with alfalfa, and feeds everything Ultium, and top dresses it all with Super Sport and Outlast. So without knowing your horses and your program, I would say that would be a good place to start.
What about a horse that's prone to colic? This is Judy.
I would say what kind of colic, because colic is not just colic. But if they are impaction colics, I'm going to say change to a more digestible hay source. Sometimes are more, like I mentioned before, we were talking about hay stretcher, your more stemmy, mature hay is just harder for their system to break down, and is going to put you at higher risk for impaction colics. Also, making sure they're good drinkers, incorporating an electrolyte if need be to keep them drinking, especially in the winter. All of that management type stuff, if it's impaction type colic. If we're talking recurrent, I just don't feel good, like I have a banamine deficiency tonight, and like they resolve and you walk them around and they get better, and they were just uncomfortable repetitively, that could be anything from ulcers. I have seen horses get hauled to the vet school thinking they were about to go have colic surgery, and turns out they just had ulcers. So investigate that. It could be something in their hindgut digestion is just not quite optimized and not working happily. So if we're talking recurrent gas colicky, recurrent just kind of different digestive upset, maybe they're uncomfortable and they're the kinds that are getting loose poop, or they're not quite right and they're like pooping a bunch of times during their rides and things like that. I also still look to the forage and look and see, is there something about their hay that's irritating the lining of their hindgut? And some of those horses simply, again, just need to switch to a higher quality, softer, more easily digestible fiber source. So it could be simple as moving from a scratchy Timothy to a soft orchard or coastal, something like that. It's just very individualized and depends on what kind of colic. Some horses that are problem colicers end up going on senior, and that's the safest, most digestible, easy to flow through the system program we can put them on. And whether that's with or without hay, sometimes that is the solution.
So, and I don't know how long we've been going, about 45 minutes. Since you talked about hindgut, tell them about the microbiome project, because I do have some of those testing envelopes. And if anybody, after you explain it, wants those, I can get those to them.
Perfect. Yeah, that would be a good kind of parting topic. Is we at Purina actually have a big project going on. It's called the Equine Microbiome Project. And what we are doing is we have decided to invest a lot of time and effort in truly understanding what's going on in the microbial community in the hindgut of the horse. That is the last remaining like black box in a horse's digestive system. There's no true way, I mean, there's no good way to get there from either end of the horse, and there's no way to do the kind of research that would really be necessary to figure out if a probiotic is really working, or figure out what probiotic would even be useful to a certain horse. Figure out if we have ideas about things that are prebiotic, which means they're food for the bugs, they're things that the bugs like, but we need to figure out what's even going on back there in the first place. So part of that project is the fact that we have cecally cannulated horses at our research farm in St. Louis, which, if anybody's familiar with the cows with the holes in their sides where you can get the window to their stomach to do digestive research, we have the horse version of that, which is a very, very important and useful tool. And that's the kind of thing you need to do real pro or prebiotic research. But the other side of that is, 8 cannulated horses on our farm in St. Louis is not enough data. So we are enlisting you guys' help to send us samples. We need bare minimum 10,000 samples of horses' microbiomes from all over the country, all different ages, eating all different feeds, living inside, outside, all of that, to put together a critical mass of data points to say, what does a normal horse's microbiome look like? And we're asking questions to go along with it. So maybe we'll be able to pick up patterns. If you say your horse, lives on a alfalfa-based diet, and we see that all the horses on the alfalfa-based diet tend to have this kind of pattern to their, amount of bifidobacterium or lactobacillus or whatever, that can help us understand things about their digestion, et cetera, et cetera. So we have like packets for you to take your own swab and mail it to St. Louis. So if anyone wants to help out with this effort, if your horses want to be part of the greater good of science to eventually develop maybe hindgut programs for horses that are truly based on data, we will give you a kit that's got a rubber glove and a swab and a little vial of solution in it, and you literally just swab your horse's rectum and get a little sampling of the microbial community that's back there, put it in the tube, put it in the envelope, mail it off to us. Get a $20 off Outlast coupon. So we try to make it worth your time, and hopefully that will contribute to us learning some new information about the horse's hindgut. We haven't finished the sequencing what's back there. So to think that you can pick a tub of a probiotic powder or pellet off the shelf at a feed store and know what it's going to do for your horse, or think that it's going to do something beneficial to them, is still a bit uncertain and far out there. So we want to kind of help tighten that up. So call Peggy if you would like to get involved.
Yeah, and you know what, Anna, I'm glad that, it kind of dovetailed into that, because I think the microbiome project is really cool. And thank you so much. And thank you everybody for coming. And here's Mr. Alan Jesse for the close. and also to tell you how you can register for the 5 free bags of feed.
Thank you, Dr. Pesta. Number one thing, it was a great presentation. Now, the most important thing here, besides her speech, is how to qualify for 5 free bags of Purina feed. Type register in the comment section. Tell us how many horses you have and which location you shop at. Again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your business, your friendship. Please stay safe and positive. And if we didn't get to your question, please, Dr. Pesta, Peggy Miles, Megan Brown, you can call any of the stores. We would love to answer those questions or get you those answers. And thank you again for all the business and support through this rough time of the new normal. And we look forward to doing this again sometime. Again, thank you, Dr. Pesta.
Yep, thank you.
Pesta. Thank you guys for coming.
Thanks.
See y'all.
Let's go out.